Tēnā koutou. I wonder if we could do a little experiment. If you've got one of these, could you hold it up? Something similar anyway. Not as nice. Mine's red. Okay, so with this, providing you played your data plan, at the moment you could access around about 1 billion websites. Some of them you shouldn't access in front of people, but nevertheless, 1 billion websites. And there's 1,200 million terabytes of data, all available to you on this remarkable little thing here. We have never lived in a time of more access to knowledge. And in many ways, of course, what Don showed us is a demonstration of that. We're researched, we're knowledgeable, we're observed, we know so much about each other. And whenever I hear that stuff, I think, do you know your neighbours? So if I sat down with you and I said, so tell me, what's your neighbours' names? And can you tell me the names of their kids? And can you tell me, if their kids are old enough, the name of their grandkids? And do you know if any of them come and stay frequently? Do you know what they do for a job? Do you know when they go away, what time of day they're there? All these questions my parents, I think, would have answered without hesitation. Without hesitation. We lived in Christchurch. I didn't grow up in a Māori whānau. I grew up in a, I suppose you kind of classic 1980s leg warmer wearing Pākehā whānau and, you know, suburban Christchurch. But my parents could have answered that question without hesitation. And the thing that stands out for me, for all of us here, is that this is an effort. This is an effort that my wife and I make to find out who our neighbours are, find out who their kids are, who their mokopuna, who their grandkids are. And it says to me there's something fundamentally wrong about the structure of our society. In a lot of ways I need a wine, because I was sitting there listening to Don Brash and thinking, I think I largely agree with a lot of what he's saying. So maybe a wine later on. But nevertheless, I think, and so my first reaction, of course, was just to be grumpy and go, statistics, and damn lies. But that's not actually true. But what I do know is this: the further we get away from each other in statistics, then the further we get away from actually resolving this issue of poverty in our society. We need to move closer to each other, not further into our information and into our data. And of course, in the day that had a name, which was a social contract. And if we look at our social contract today, and when I looked at the question about income inequality, for me it's a symptom of a breakdown in who we are as a society. And income inequality is a symptom of our breakdown in care and love for one another. So for example, in Maryvale, every other school around the country, on average, about 55% of those kids are driven to school every day. And they are driven to school because those parents don't know if they can trust you. Those parents aren't sure that their kids are going to be safe on the streets walking to school, because they might encounter you, and who knows what you're like, and who knows what you'll do to the kids. And that's not real. Crime overall, give or take a few stats, is at a historical low really in our country, about 35-year low in terms of crime. But if you talk to people, then what statistics, what surveyors have found, of course, is that most of us think crime has gone up. I think crime is worse. And then if you ask people about the actual community they live in, they go, oh no, crime doesn't really happen here. But when we look at our country, we think this is a more dangerous place. It's a more dangerous place to raise our children. The other thing, of course, you can look at is how we treat the poorest in our society. So if you look at prosecutions of benefit fraud against white-collar crime in our society, then what you find is that the Ministry of Social Development invests around about 100 times more in investigating benefit fraud than the IRD does in investigating white-collar crime in our society. The reason it does it, of course, is because, and here we go with the 80s kid again, I grew up knowing that people on the benefit were bludgers, that people on the benefit were there because of a personal failure. They'd failed to seize the wonderful opportunities our society provides. So as a start to talking to you this afternoon, my view is this: income inequality is important, and people's capacity to pay their bills, to pay their housing costs, that's important. But underneath that is something fundamentally more worrying to me, which is our social contract with each other. And part of the reason our social contract has collapsed, in my opinion, is because our sense of who we are has collapsed as well. So just out there, we can't actually see our lovely mountain today. Thanks a lot, Max Rashbrook, who sent this weather up from Wellington for us. Nevertheless, just out there is Mowal. And then if you looked across from Mowal, you would see Sulphur Point. And hopefully all of you have visited the Elms, which is a lovely place there. Well, in 1818, Ngāpuhi came down and they visited the pā there. The pā's name is Otamataha. And the pā went right along the strand, up there to where the Elms is. So it was an enormous pā. And it was one of those first war parties with muskets that came through. And they wiped out the people who lived in that place. Anyway, they left, they carried on their way. They took some people away as slaves. And then in 1820, Ngāti Mutunga returned. They went to the same pā. They went through and they killed women and children and men, and they set up an enormous cooking fire there, and they ate the people of that pā. And from that point on, that pā was never occupied again. And those three people spread out. Some of them went over to Matapihi, others of them went over to Mowal, and others of them went over to Otamoitai. And three of our contemporary hapu, Ngāi Tamarawaho, Ngāti Tapu, and Ngāti Tūkairangi, Ngāi Tūkairangi, come from that event. What's remarkable about those people is not the tragedy they suffered. What's remarkable is they went away from those places and re-established homes, re-established crops, re-established places of learning, re-established their technology, re-established a future for their mokopuna. And you think, how, under these terrible circumstances, could people have done such a thing? But then we only need to look forward 100 years to the two world wars to see communities in Europe that did exactly the same thing. In the face of incredible tragedy and loss of life, they re-established towns, cities, homes, a future for their tamariki and children. And at the heart of that is an identity. At the heart of that are communities that in the face of tragedy know who they are. They know their language. They understand how they fit within their society, and they understand what they have to contribute to their society. For me, I think one of the tragedies of modern-day Aotearoa New Zealand is that we've lost that sense of who we are as communities. And I include my own Māori whānau in that. We've lost the sense of how we belong and how we fit. Now, someone much smarter than me, Emile Durkheim, called it enemy. And Emile Durkheim came up with this concept of enemy when he was looking at suicide in 7 nations around the world. This is a long time ago, towards the turn of the beginning of the 20th century. He wanted to understand why does suicide happen in these 7 countries? And what he understood even then in developed Western countries was that where people were removed from the capacity to contribute to their society, they would enter a state of depression, which he called enemy. And the response within that would be a variety of responses, which then Richard Merton went on to explain. He gave 4 possible responses. 1 was just to conform, 2 was to retreat, 3 was to innovate, and then the 4th escapes me right at the moment because someone said 1 minute. I think they said 1 minute, is that right? Yes. Nevertheless, I think the thing we need to understand about our society is we have lost the capacity to give our young people and our communities meaning. Which brings me on to the last point. Are we going to fix this by lowering housing costs? Are we going to fix this by a universal basic income? Are we going to fix this by providing a greater family package through Labour? Or are we going to fix this by providing tax cuts through National? And my answer is none of the above. None of the above. They'll contribute. But at the heart of it, we need to shore up the identity of our communities. So we need those things to ensure strong communities. We need to ensure people can afford housing. We need to ensure they can afford food on the table. We need to ensure they can provide education to their children. But we forget who we are if we think that it's about the income and the expenditure. Income and expenditure are just indicative of a capitalist society and our way of measuring a capitalist society. But social contract and community identity, that's about us as humans. Not parties, not politics, but humans. Nā reira, kei te mihi ki a koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa.